The throne room stretched endlessly before him, walls of crystalline gold rising toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Thousands of beings knelt in perfect silence, their silver skin reflecting the amber light that poured through windows carved from pure energy. Harold Mitchell stood at the center of it all, a 68-year-old man from Texas, wearing a suit his son had picked out just 3 days ago. He had never felt more out of place in his entire life. Queen Valeria descended the steps of her throne, each footfall echoing through the vast chamber like the heartbeat of a dying god. Her gown flowed behind her like liquid starlight, and her golden eyes fixed upon him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. She moved with the grace of someone who had ruled for 2 centuries, yet there was something vulnerable in the way she approached him now. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the faint luminescent patterns pulsing beneath her silver skin, close enough that he could smell something like midnight Asmin and distant thunder. Then she did something that made every being in that throne room gasp in collective shock. She knelt before him. The Queen of the Valorian Federation, ruler of 10,000 worlds, commander of the largest fleet in the known galaxy, knelt before a retired army medic from a small town outside Austin. Her voice carried through the silence like music. Before the entire Federation, I ask you one question, Harold Mitchell of Earth. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Will you permit me to sit upon you once more? The memory of everything they had been through flickered behind his eyes. The cornfield, the first touch, the battles, the sacrifice. The moment he died and came back because she refused to let him go. He cleared his throat, painfully aware of millions of eyes watching him. Madam, he said, his Texas drawl echoing through the alien architecture. Last time you did that, my back hurt for a week. Queen Valeria laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 200 years. The sound rang through the throne room like bells, and the assembled masses stared in disbelief at their monarch. This woman of stone and duty, laughing like a young girl at a joke only she and this strange old human understood. So is that a yes? She asked, her golden eyes sparkling with something that looked remarkably like hope. Harry smiled, the kind of smile that came from a place so deep inside him he had forgotten it existed. I already told you, madam. You can sit on me anytime you want, even if it hurts. I will always be here. 2 weeks earlier, none of this had seemed possible. 2 weeks earlier, Harold Mitchell was just an old man talking to his dog. The alarm clock read 4:47 a.m. when Harry's eyes opened. No buzzer had sounded. No noise had disturbed the silence of his small farmhouse. His body simply knew, after 30 years of the same routine, that it was time to wake up. Some habits from the army never faded, no matter how many decades passed since a man hung up his uniform. He lay there for a moment staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar creak of the old house settling around him. Through the window, the first hints of gray light were beginning to paint the Texas sky. Another day, another morning alone. A wet nose pressed against his hand, and Harry turned to see Mac watching him from the side of the bed. The German shepherd was 14 years old now, his muzzle more white than black, his movements slower than they used to be. But those eyes still held the same intelligence, the same quiet understanding that had made him the best military working dog Harry had ever known. Another day, huh, buddy? Harry said, his voice rough with sleep. You and me, Payne. Last 2 soldiers standing. Max's tail thumped against the wooden floor twice. It was the closest thing to a yes that a dog could give. Harry swung his legs out of bed, feeling the familiar ache in his knees, the stiffness in his lower back that never quite went away anymore. 68 years had left their mark on his body. The shrapnel scar on his left thigh from Kuwait, the burns on his forearms from an engine fire back in '93, the invisible wounds that no doctor could see but that woke him up at 3 a.m. most nights, drenched in sweat, reaching for a rifle that was not there. He made his way to the kitchen, Max padding along behind him. The coffee pot was ancient, a Mr. Coffee machine that Linda had bought back in 2005. He had never replaced it. Somehow using her coffee pot every morning made her feel a little less gone. Her photograph still sat on the windowsill above the sink. Linda Marie Mitchell, taken on their 25th anniversary, laughing at something Harry had said. He could not remember the joke anymore. He just remembered her laugh. 14 years, he said softly, touching the frame with calloused fingers. 14 years today, sweetheart. I still miss you every damn day." Max pressed against his leg, and Harry reached down to scratch behind the old dog's ears. It was their morning ritual. Coffee, Linda's picture, a moment of remembrance. Then the day would begin, and Harry would find ways to fill the hours until night came again. He poured his coffee black, no sugar, and stepped out onto the porch. The Texas morning stretched before him, endless fields of corn swaying gently in the pre-dawn breeze. His little farm sat on 40 acres at the edge of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but cropland and sky. It was quiet here, peaceful, the kind of place where a man could disappear from the world if he wanted to. And Harry had wanted to, for a very long time. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked the screen and sighed. "Mr. Mitchell?" Tommy Patterson's voice was high with panic. "That combine harvester died again. I know it is early, but today is the last day of harvest, and if I do not get that machine running by noon, I am going to lose everything. Please, sir, you are the only one who can fix it." Harry looked out at his peaceful cornfield. "So much for a quiet morning. I will be there in 30 minutes, he said. "And Tommy, this is the 4th time this season. We are going to have a conversation about preventive maintenance." "Yes, sir. Anything you say, sir." "Thank you, sir." Harry hung up and drained his coffee. Max looked up at him expectantly. "Stay here, old-timer," Harry said. "Guard the house. I will be back before lunch." Max's tail wagged once, and then the old dog settled onto the porch with a heavy sigh, as if he knew exactly how this day would go. Harry had been fixing other people's problems for 40 years. It was what he did. It was all he knew how to do. He grabbed his toolbox from the garage and climbed into his battered Ford pickup. The engine coughed twice before turning over, and Harry made a mental note to check the starter motor later. The truck was almost as old as Max, and just as stubborn about admitting it was falling apart. The drive to the Patterson farm took 20 minutes through empty back roads. The sun was fully up now, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. It was beautiful country out here. Harry had always thought so, even when everything else in his life had gone wrong. Tommy was waiting by the dead combine when Harry pulled up, practically bouncing with anxiety. The young farmer was only 35, but he looked older today, dark circles under his eyes, desperation etched into every line of his face. This harvest would make or break his year, maybe make or break his whole farm. Harry climbed out of the truck, grabbed his toolbox, and walked over to the massive machine without a word. He circled it once, listening, looking, the way a doctor might examine a patient before making a diagnosis. "What happened?" he asked finally. "I do not know," Tommy said. "It just stopped, right in the middle of the field. No warning, no strange sounds. It just died." Harry grunted and climbed up into the engine compartment. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking connections, testing components, feeling for the telltale signs of mechanical failure. After 40 years of fixing everything from helicopters to tractors, his fingers knew what to look for even when his eyes could not see it. 20 minutes later, he found the problem. "Here," he said, pointing to a small component buried deep in the engine block. "Your fuel injector control module is shot, probably been failing for weeks. You would have noticed if you had been checking your diagnostic codes like I showed you." Tommy's face fell. "That sounds expensive." "It is, but you are lucky. I have one in my truck that will fit. Pulled it off a John Deere last month. Same part, different color." Tommy stared at him. "You just happen to have one?" "I have a lot of things," Harry said. "When you have been fixing machines as long as I have, you learn to keep parts around. Never know when someone is going to need them." It took another hour to install the replacement part, test the system, and get the combine running again. By the time Harry climbed down from the engine compartment, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his back was screaming at him. But the machine was purring like a kitten, ready for another day of harvest. Tommy grabbed his hand and shook it vigorously. "Mr. Mitchell, I do not know how to thank you. Everyone said the dealer would have to send someone from Dallas, that it would take 3 days minimum. But you just walked in and fixed it like it was nothing." "It was not nothing," Harry said. "It was 40 years of experience. There is a difference. What do I owe you?" Harry considered. The part itself was worth maybe $200. His time, if he charged by the hour like the dealer mechanics did, would add another $300 at least. He looked at Tommy's worn boots, his patched jeans, the worry lines around his eyes. "Case of Shiner Bach," Harry said. "And you start doing your monthly maintenance checks like I taught you." "That is it?" "Mr. Mitchell, that is not nearly enough." Harry clapped the younger man on the shoulder. "Son, I have more money than I need and less time than I want. If I can help a neighbor keep his farm running, that is payment enough for me." He climbed back into his truck before Tommy could argue further. The young farmer stood there watching as Harry drove away, shaking his head in disbelief. This was why people called Harry Old Iron Hands. Not because his hands were actually made of iron, but because there was nothing those hands could not fix, and because he never charged what his skills were worth. The truth was simpler and sadder than any nickname could capture. Harry fixed things because fixing things was the only way he knew to matter. He could not fix his marriage after Linda died. He could not fix his relationship with Jake, who was too busy with his Air Force career to call more than once a month. He could not fix the nightmares or the empty house or the crushing weight of loneliness that pressed down on him every single day. But he could fix a combine harvester. He could fix a tractor engine. He could fix a neighbor's fence or a stranger's car or anything else mechanical that crossed his path. It was not much, but it was something. He was halfway home when the first strange thing happened. His hands began to glow. It was faint at first, barely visible in the morning light. A soft blue luminescence emanating from beneath his skin, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Harry pulled the truck over to the side of the road and stared at his hands, watching the light flicker and dance across his palms. This had happened before, many times over the past 30 years, usually at night when he was alone, when there was no one around to see. The glow would come and go, sometimes lasting minutes, sometimes hours. He had learned to hide it, to wait it out, to pretend it was not happening. But it had never been this bright before, and it had never happened in broad daylight. He flexed his fingers, watching the light ripple beneath his skin. After all these years, he still did not understand what had happened to him in that desert, what that dying alien had done when it touched his chest, what he had become in the 30 years since. All he knew was that he was not normal, had not been normal since Kuwait. Whatever energy lived inside him, it was getting stronger, and he did not know whether that was a blessing or a curse. The glow faded after a few minutes, and Harry sat there in his truck, staring at his hands, wondering for the 1,000th time if he was slowly going insane. Then he shook his head, put the truck in gear, and drove home. There was no point in worrying about things he could not control. There never had been. Max was waiting on the porch when he pulled up, tail wagging slowly. Harry sat down beside the old dog, scratching behind his ears, looking out at the endless cornfield that surrounded his little farmhouse. "Just another day, Max," he said quietly. "Just another day." But it was not just another day, it was the day everything changed. Night came to the Texas plains like a whispered secret. The sun sank below the horizon in a blaze of orange and red, and darkness crept across the land like a living thing. Stars emerged one by one, scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds thrown by a careless god. Harry sat on his porch with a cold beer in his hand and Max at his feet, watching the universe reveal itself. This was his favorite time of day, the quiet hours, the peaceful hours, when the world stopped demanding things from him and he could just exist. Linda would have loved tonight, he said to no one in particular. She always said the Texas sky was God's own cathedral. I think she was right. Max lifted his head and made a small sound in his throat. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine, something in between that Harry had learned to interpret over 14 years of companionship. "Yeah, I know," he said. "I talk to you like you understand. Maybe I am just a crazy old man, but you are the best listener I have ever known, and that is saying something." He took a long pull from his beer and leaned back in his chair. The night was warm, the air thick with the smell of corn and earth and the distant promise of rain. Somewhere in the darkness, crickets sang their endless song. It was peaceful. It was perfect. And then the sky split open. Harry saw it before he heard it, a streak of brilliant blue light tearing across the heavens, brighter than any shooting star he had ever seen. It moved with purpose, not the random trajectory of a meteorite, but the controlled descent of something that knew exactly where it was going. Where it was going was his cornfield. The impact was silent. No explosion, no thunderous crash, just a flash of blue light that illuminated the entire farm for one heartbeat, and then darkness again. Harry was on his feet before he realized he had moved. Military training kicked in, 30-year-old instincts surging through his body like electricity. He grabbed the shotgun from just inside the door, the one he kept loaded for coyotes, and started walking toward the field. Max was right beside him, hackles raised, but not barking. That was strange. Max barked at everything. Strangers, cars, the mailman, even his own reflection sometimes. But whatever was out there in that cornfield, Max was watching it in absolute silence. "Stay close," Harry muttered. "And if I say run, you run. Understand?" Max did not respond. He just kept walking forward as if he knew something Harry did not, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The cornstalks had been flattened in a perfect circle, maybe 50 feet across. At the center of the circle sat something that made Harry stop dead in his tracks. It was a ship, small, maybe the size of a compact car, shaped like a teardrop made of liquid silver. It did not reflect the starlight so much as absorb it, taking in the light and giving back something softer, something almost alive. Harry had seen something like this once before, 30 years ago, in a desert on the other side of the world. His hands began to glow again, that soft blue light pulsing beneath his skin. Brighter now, much brighter, as if whatever lived inside him recognized what was in front of him, as if it was calling out to something, or something was calling out to it. A seam appeared in the surface of the ship, and a doorway opened, spilling golden light into the Texas night. A figure emerged. She was tall, perhaps 5'9", with skin the color of polished silver, and hair that fell past her shoulders in waves of pure black, shot through with strands of luminescent white. Her eyes were gold, bright and deep and ancient, and when they found Harry standing there with his shotgun and his glowing hands and his old dog, they widened with something that looked like recognition. No, something that looked like relief. She stepped forward, her feet barely seeming to touch the crushed cornstalks. She moved with a grace that was not quite human, an elegance that spoke of centuries of refinement. And when she spoke, her voice was like music, like wind chimes in a summer storm, like nothing Harry had ever heard before. "At last," she said, "I have found you." Harry raised his shotgun slightly, not pointing it at her, but not lowering it either. "Lady, this is private property. You are trespassing." She smiled at that, a small, sad smile that did not reach her eyes. "He pointed a gun at me," she said, as if speaking to herself. 30 years later, and the Mitchell men still point guns first and ask questions later. Harry went very still. "How do you know my name?" She took another step toward him. The light from her ship caught the patterns on her skin, and Harry realized they were not patterns at all. They were circuits of some kind, channels of energy flowing beneath her silver flesh. "I am Valeria Severin," she said, "Queen of the Valorian Federation, and I have traveled 4,000 light years to ask you one question." "Harold Mitchell." Harry did not lower the shotgun. "What question?" Valeria stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her golden eyes, close enough that he could see the faint tremor in her hands, close enough that he could see that this woman, this alien queen, was barely holding herself together. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, she knelt in the dirt before him. Max sat down beside her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if an alien queen kneeling in a cornfield was something that happened every Tuesday. Valeria looked up at Harry, her golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Will you permit me," she said, "to sit upon you?" The silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Crickets sang. The corn rustled in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the star-filled sky. Harry stared at the alien queen kneeling before him. He looked at his dog, who was looking at her like she was an old friend. He looked at his hands, still glowing with that strange blue light. Then he said the only thing that made any sense. "Lady, are you out of your damn mind?" Valeria's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I know how this sounds. I know how this appears. An alien woman descends from the sky and asks an old man if she can sit on him." "It sounds like madness. It sounds like a lot of things," Harry said. "Madness is pretty high on the list. But I am not mad, and I am not here by accident. I am here because 30 years ago, in a desert far from here, you saved someone. And that someone gave you a gift that makes you the only being in this galaxy who can help me. Harry's finger tightened on the shotgun trigger. Then slowly he lowered the weapon. Start talking, he said, and this better be good. They sat at his kitchen table, the alien queen and the old soldier, with 2 cups of coffee between them and 30 years of questions hanging in the air. Max lay at Valeria's feet, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. You said I saved someone, Harry said. 30 years ago. Yes. In Kuwait. Yes. Harry was quiet for a long moment. He had never told anyone the full story of what happened that night. Not his commanding officers, not his wife, not even his own son. He had kept it buried deep inside him for 3 decades, convinced that speaking it aloud would make him sound insane. But this woman knew. Somehow she knew. I was 38, he said slowly. Combat medic with the 1st Cavalry Division. We were pushing through the desert, middle of the night, trying to link up with our forward units. I got separated from my squad during a sandstorm. Valeria nodded, listening intently. I saw something fall from the sky. At first I thought it was one of ours going down. A helicopter maybe, or a jet that took fire. I ran toward it because that is what we did. You see something fall, you go help. You do not think about it. You just go. What did you find? Harry took a sip of his coffee. His hands were trembling slightly, and he was not sure if it was from the memory or from the energy pulsing beneath his skin. A ship, he said, small, like yours, but damaged. Burning. I could see something moving inside. Someone. My father, Valeria said softly. Harry looked up at her. Your father? Emperor Kyle Severin. He ruled the Federation for 500 years before passing the throne to me. He was a good man, a great leader, and he was dying in that desert when you found him. The memories came flooding back. The heat, the smoke, the smell of something that was not quite metal and not quite flesh. Harry pulling open the damaged hull with his bare hands, finding the silver-skinned man inside, barely alive, bleeding from wounds that glowed blue in the darkness. I did not know what he was, Harry said. I did not care. He was hurt. I was a medic. That was all that mattered. How long did you work on him? 6 hours. I used everything I had, field dressings, morphine, my own water rations. I talked to him the whole time, even though I did not know if he could understand me. Told him about Linda, about the baby we were trying to have, about the little farm I wanted to buy when I got home. I talked and I worked and I prayed, because that is all a medic can do sometimes. Talk and work and pray. Valeria's eyes were glistening. What did he say to you? Harry set down his coffee cup. At the end, when I knew I could not save him, he opened his eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me, like he could see something inside me that I could not see myself. The heart of a protector, Valeria said. That is what he called it. Yeah, he said I had the heart of a protector. Said he had been looking for someone like me for a long time. Then he put his hand on my chest. Harry unconsciously touched the spot where the alien emperor had touched him all those years ago. The skin there always felt warm, even on the coldest nights, as if something inside him was still burning, still waiting. And he gave you his gift, Valeria said. He gave me something. I still do not know what it is, but I have not been the same since. My hands glow. I cannot touch people without hurting them. My wife, she wanted to hold me when I came back from the war, and I burned her. Not badly, but enough. Enough that she was afraid of me for a while. Enough that I was afraid of myself. He looked at Valeria with eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. Your father gave me something, he said, but it felt more like a curse than a gift. 30 years of not being able to touch anyone. 30 years of sleeping alone, even when my wife was right next to me. 30 years of watching my son grow up without ever being able to hug him. Valeria reached across the table and took his hand. Harry flinched, expecting the familiar surge of energy, the burning sensation that always came when someone touched his skin, but it did not come. Her hand was cool against his, almost cold, and the energy inside him settled like a wild animal finally finding rest. He stared at their joined hands in disbelief. How are you doing that? The gift my father gave you, Valeria said, is not a curse. It is the most sacred energy in our civilization. We call it the light of the protector. It has been passed down through chosen individuals for 10,000 years, always finding those with hearts pure enough to carry it. That does not explain why I cannot touch anyone. The light is powerful, too powerful for most beings to withstand. When you touch someone, the energy transfers to them and they cannot handle it. It burns them. Then why does it not burn you? Valeria smiled sadly. Because I have my own burden. I am the queen of the Valorian Federation. My body generates what we call the royal field, an energy matrix that protects our ruler from harm. It is so strong that I cannot touch anything without destroying it. I cannot sit. I cannot lie down on any normal surface. I cannot embrace another being. For how long? 200 years, Harold. 200 years since I took the throne. 200 years of standing, of floating, of never once feeling another person's touch. Harry stared at her. The weight of what she was saying settled over him like a blanket of stones. Your father's gift, Valeria continued, neutralizes my field. The light of the protector absorbs energy. All energy, including mine. She squeezed his hand gently. You are the only being in this galaxy that I can touch. The only one I can sit upon without destroying. The only one who can give me what I have not had in 2 centuries. Harry's throat was dry. What is that? Rest, she said simply. Peace, the feeling of being held by someone who will not shatter beneath me. He looked at this alien woman, this queen of 10,000 worlds, and saw something he recognized. Something he had seen in his own mirror every morning for 30 years. Loneliness. Bone-deep, soul-crushing loneliness. The kind that came from being surrounded by millions of people and still feeling utterly alone. I understand, he said quietly. More than you know. She smiled at him then, and it was the first real smile she had worn in 200 years. I know you do, Harold Mitchell. That is why my father chose you. They talked through the night, exchanging stories like old soldiers comparing scars. Harry told her about Linda, about the cancer that took her, about the guilt he carried because he could not hold her at the end. Valeria told him about her father, about the burden of the crown, about 2 centuries of carrying a civilization on shoulders that were never allowed to rest. By the time the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, something had shifted between them. Not trust exactly, not friendship, but the beginning of understanding. 2 lonely souls recognizing each other across an impossible distance. So what now? Harry asked, pouring the last of the coffee into their cups. Before Valeria could answer, Max lifted his head and growled. It was the first sound the old dog had made since the Queen arrived. A low, rumbling warning that Harry had learned to take seriously over 14 years of partnership. What is it, boy? Max did not answer. He just stared at the window, hackles raised, teeth bared. And then Harry heard it. A low hum. The sound of engines. Not one, but many. He grabbed a shotgun and moved to the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. 5 ships were descending through the morning sky, larger than Valeria's, darker. They moved in formation, military precision in every angle of their approach. Valeria stood beside him, her golden eyes narrowing. Draven. Who? My cousin, regent of the Federation in my absence. He followed me here. Is that bad? Valeria did not answer. The look on her face said enough. The ships landed in a circle around Harry's farmhouse, blocking every possible escape route. Doors opened. Soldiers emerged, dozens of them, silver-skinned like Valeria, but clad in dark armor that absorbed the morning light. One figure stepped forward from the largest ship. He was tall, taller than Valeria, with features that might have been called handsome if they were not so cold. His silver skin was darker than hers, almost gray, and his eyes were the color of frozen amber. Cousin, he said, his voice carrying across the yard, you had us worried. Valeria stepped onto the porch, her chin raised, her posture perfect despite the exhaustion that Harry knew she was feeling. Draven. I told you I wished to make this journey alone, and I told you that was unacceptable. The Queen of the Federation does not simply vanish to a primitive world without protection. This world is not primitive, and I do not need protection. Draven's eyes slid past Valeria to where Harry stood in the doorway, shotgun in hand. Especially not from this. What is he exactly? Some kind of pet you picked up? Harry felt his jaw tighten. He had faced down Iraqi Republican guard with less hostility than he was feeling right now. "Careful," he said quietly. "You are on my property." Draven laughed, a cold sound, utterly without warmth. "Your property? Old man, do you have any idea who you are speaking to? I am Prince Draven of House Severin, regent of the Valorian Federation, commander of the largest military force in this quadrant of the galaxy, and you are a withered human standing in a field of vegetables." "Corn," Harry said. "What? It is corn, not vegetables." "Well, technically corn is a grain, but the point stands. This is my land. These are my crops. That is my house, and you were not invited." "Harry," Valeria said softly, "perhaps this is not the time." "No," Harry said, never taking his eyes off Draven. "I think this is exactly the time. I spent 30 years wondering what happened to me in that desert. 30 years thinking I was cursed. 30 years alone because of something your people did to me. And now this guy shows up at my home and calls me a pet." He stepped off the porch, moving toward Draven with the calm confidence of a man who had faced death before and found it wanting. "I do not know anything about your politics," he said. "I do not know anything about your federation or your royal family or whatever else you got going on up there in space. But I know this. That woman came to me for help. She is a guest in my home. And where I come from, we protect our guests." Draven's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly do you plan to do that, old man?" Harry smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Son, I survived Kuwait. I survived 30 years with whatever your emperor put inside me. I survived losing my wife and raising a son and fixing every broken machine in 3 counties. You think you scare me?" Behind Draven, one of the soldiers raised a weapon that glowed with blue energy. Harry did not flinch. "I have been waiting to die for a long time," he said. "You would be doing me a favor." The silence stretched. The soldiers shifted nervously. Even Draven seemed uncertain how to respond to this strange old human who showed no fear. Then a new voice broke the tension. "Stand down." A woman emerged from one of the ships, tall, scarred, her silver skin marked with the evidence of countless battles. She moved with the lethal grace of a warrior who had earned her rank through blood and fire. "General KL," Draven said, irritation flickering across his face. "I did not request your input." "You did not," the general agreed, "but I am giving it anyway. This human is under the protection of the Queen. If you harm him, you will have to explain yourself to the High Council. Do you really want that fight?" Draven glared at her. Then he looked at Valeria, then at Harry. "Fine," he said at last. "Keep your human pet, cousin. But this is not over. You cannot hide on this primitive rock forever." "I am not hiding," Valeria said. "I am seeking treatment. The council knows about my condition. They approved this mission. They approved you finding a cure. They did not approve you finding a—" He gestured vaguely at Harry. "Whatever this is the man my father chose," Valeria said quietly. "The man who carries the light of the protector. Show him the respect that title deserves." Something shifted in Draven's expression. The mockery faded, replaced by something colder. Something more calculating. "The light," he said. "So it is true. He has the light." "Yes." Draven looked at Harry with new eyes, appraising eyes, the eyes of a predator sizing up potential prey. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting." He turned and walked back toward his ship, his soldiers falling in behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back. "I am leaving General KO and a security detail," he said. "For your protection, of course. We would not want anything to happen to the Queen or her precious light bearer." The door closed behind him, and his ship rose into the sky, leaving 4 vessels and their crews behind. Valeria let out a breath she had been holding. That could have gone worse. "Could it?" Harry asked. "Oh yes, much worse." General Kale approached them, her scarred face unreadable. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the prince's behavior. It is not your fault, Raven. You are doing your duty." The general's eyes moved to Harry. Assessing, measuring. She reminded him of every senior NCO he had ever served with. Hard as nails, sharp as a knife, but fair to those who earned her respect. "You stood up to him," she said. "No one stands up to Draven." "First time for everything," Harry said. The general almost smiled. "Almost. I think I understand why the Emperor chose you, human. Call me Harry." "Harry," she nodded once. "We will be watching over you. Both of you. Whatever Draven is planning, he will not find it easy to execute. She turned and began issuing orders to her troops, establishing a perimeter around the farmhouse. Harry watched her go, then turned to Valeria. So what is Draven planning exactly? Valeria was quiet for a moment. My death, she said finally. He has been planning it for decades, but he needs it to look natural, acceptable. And you came here anyway? I had no choice. The royal field is destabilizing. Without treatment, I will lose control within months. And when that happens, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. What happens? Harry asked. The field will release, all at once, an explosion of pure energy. It will destroy everything within miles, perhaps more. Harry looked at his little farmhouse, at his cornfield, at Max, still sitting on the porch, watching everything with those wise old eyes. So you came here, he said, slowly, knowing that if something goes wrong, you might blow up my farm. And me with it. Yes, and you did not think to mention that earlier? Valeria met his gaze. Would it have changed your answer? Harry thought about it, about 30 years of loneliness, about the curse he had carried and the life he had lost, about this silver-skinned woman who had traveled across the galaxy just to find someone who could let her rest. No, he said, I guess it would not. Valeria smiled then, really smiled, and for a moment she looked almost human. Then we should begin, she said. The sooner I stabilize, the safer everyone will be. Begin? Begin what? Valeria's smile took on a hint of mischief. Teaching you how to be a throne, Harold Mitchell. It is harder than it sounds, Harry sighed, looking up at the morning sky where Draven's ship had vanished. Great, he said. 68 years old and I am learning a new job. As a piece of furniture for an alien queen. While her homicidal cousin plots to kill us both. Max barked once, wagging his tail. At least someone thinks this is funny, Harry muttered. But as he followed Valeria back into the house, he realized something strange. For the first time in 30 years, he did not feel alone. And despite everything, despite the danger and the confusion and the complete insanity of this situation, that feeling alone was worth more than he could say. The morning after Draven's departure brought an uneasy quiet to the little Texas farm. Harry stood on his porch with his third cup of coffee, watching the Valorian soldiers patrol his property like it was some kind of military installation. General Kale had positioned her troops at strategic intervals around the perimeter, their silver skin catching the early sunlight as they moved through his cornfield with professional precision. It was strange seeing aliens walk through corn he had planted with his own hands. Strange and somehow fitting. His whole life had been strange since Kuwait. Why should his death be any different? Max sat beside him, that old German shepherd, watching the soldiers with an intensity that Harry had never seen before. Usually Max slept most of the day, conserving what little energy his 14-year-old body had left. But since Valeria arrived, the dog had been alert, watchful, almost protective. You know something I do not, boy? Harry asked, scratching behind the dog's ears. Max did not answer. He just kept watching. Inside the house, Valeria stood by the window. She had been standing there all night. Harry had offered her the couch, the bed, even the old recliner that Linda used to love. She had declined them all with a cheerless smile. I would destroy them, she had explained. The royal field does not rest simply because I wish to. So she stood, hour after hour, year after year, century after century, standing because sitting was not an option. Standing because the alternative was destruction. Harry could not imagine it, could not fathom 200 years without ever sitting down, without ever lying in a soft bed, without ever feeling the simple comfort of a chair beneath him after a long day's work. And yet here she was, still standing, still fighting, still hoping that somehow, some way, she might finally rest. He finished his coffee and went inside. Okay, he said, let us get started. Valeria turned from the window. Started? You said you needed to teach me how to be a throne. I figure the sooner we start, the sooner we know if this is going to work. She studied him for a moment. Her golden eyes held something he could not quite identify. Gratitude, perhaps, or maybe just surprise that he was willing to try. It will not be easy, she said. The process requires physical contact, extended physical contact. Your body will need to learn how to absorb and neutralize my field without conscious effort. How long does that take? Days, perhaps weeks. And there is significant risk. If your body rejects the field at any point during the process, the results could be catastrophic. Harry shrugged. I have been living on borrowed time since 1991. A little more risk is not going to change much. You are remarkably calm about the possibility of death. Lady, at my age, death is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. The only question is how and when. If I am going to go, might as well be trying to help someone instead of just waiting for the clock to run out. Valeria was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Very well. We will begin with something simple. She walked to the kitchen table and placed her hand flat on the wooden surface. Within seconds, the wood began to smoke. Tiny cracks appeared, spreading outward from her palm like lightning frozen in amber. The smell of burning oak filled the room. This is what happens to everything I touch, she said, lifting her hand. The table bore a perfect handprint, scorched deep into the grain. My field destroys. It cannot help itself. Harry looked at the burned handprint, then at his own hands. The faint blue glow was there again, pulsing beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. And you think I can stop that? I know you can. The light of the protector absorbs energy. All energy. It is why my father gave it to you. He knew that someday I would need someone who could withstand me. She held out her hand. Touch me, she said, just your fingertips against mine. We will see what happens. Harry hesitated. 30 years of conditioning screamed at him to pull back, to protect himself, to protect her. Every time he had touched someone since Kuwait, he had hurt them. Every single time. But Valeria was not just someone. She was the daughter of the man who had changed him, the woman who had traveled across the galaxy to find him, the queen who had knelt in his cornfield and asked for his help. He reached out and touched her fingertips with his own. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Energy surged between them, her field pushing against his light. Two opposing forces meeting at the point of contact. Harry felt heat building in his hands, spreading up his arms, filling his chest with a pressure that threatened to crack his ribs. But he did not pull away. He gritted his teeth and held on, focusing on the feeling of her skin against his, the coolness of her silver flesh, the faint pulse of something alive beneath the surface. The energy continued to build, reaching a crescendo that made his vision blur and his ears ring. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The pressure released. The heat faded, the blue glow in his hands dimmed to a soft shimmer, and Valeria's field settled into something almost peaceful. She was staring at their joined fingertips with an expression of wonder. It worked, she whispered. I can feel you absorbing it. The field is still there, but it is contained, controlled. Is that good? That is remarkable. I have never felt anything like this in 200 years. Harry let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His hands were shaking slightly, and his heart was pounding like he had just run a marathon. But he was alive. She was alive. And for the first time since this whole crazy situation began, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this might actually work. Okay, he said, what is next? Valeria smiled, that uncertain, vulnerable smile that made her look almost human. Next, she said, we hold hands. Over the following 3 days, they progressed through a series of increasingly intimate contacts. Fingertips became palms. Palms became forearms. Each escalation brought new challenges, new surges of energy that Harry had to learn to absorb and neutralize. Each success brought them closer to the ultimate goal. General Kale observed their progress with growing interest. The scarred warrior had initially dismissed Harry as a curiosity, an old human who had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. But as she watched him work with Valeria, her attitude began to shift. You do not complain, she said to him on the second night, while Valeria rested in her standing meditation. About what? The pain. I have seen what happens when two incompatible energy signatures meet. It is not pleasant, yet you endure it without protest. Harry shrugged. I was a combat medic for 15 years. I have felt worse. Have you? You ever had to perform field surgery on yourself with a pocket knife and no anesthetic? I have. Twice. Trust me, this is not the worst thing I have experienced. Kale studied him with those battle-hardened eyes. You are not what I expected, human. Neither are you, General. What do you mean? Harry leaned back in his chair, watching the stars through the kitchen window. You are supposed to be my guard, my watcher. But you look at Valeria like she is your own daughter. You stood up to Draven when you did not have to. You care about her. Actually care. Kael was silent for a long moment. I served her father, she said finally. Emperor Kael was the greatest leader our people have ever known. When he passed, he asked me to protect Valeria, to guide her, to help her become the ruler he knew she could be. And have you? I have tried, but Valeria is stubborn. She carries too much weight alone. She refuses to let anyone help her. Maybe she just needed to find the right person. Kael looked at him sharply. Maybe she did. On the third day, everything changed. They were in the middle of a training session, Harry and Valeria sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, their hands clasped together as he worked to stabilize her field. It had become almost routine by then. The surge of energy, the moment of resistance, the gradual settling as his light absorbed her excess power. But this time something went wrong. Valeria gasped suddenly, her grip tightening on his hands. Her eyes went wide, the golden color bleeding into pure white, and her field exploded outward with a force that shattered every window in the farmhouse. Harry was thrown backward, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. He hit the floor and immediately tried to rise, but his body would not cooperate. Every muscle screamed in protest. Every nerve ending felt like it was on fire. Across the room, Valeria was floating 3 feet off the ground, her body wreathed in crackling energy that lashed out in all directions. The table beneath her disintegrated. The floor began to buckle and char. The very air seemed to burn. "Valeria!" Harry shouted over the roar of unleashed power. "Valeria, look at me!" She did not respond. Her eyes were still that terrible white, her face contorted in an expression of pure agony. Whatever was happening to her, she had no control over it. General Kael burst through the door, weapon raised, only to be driven back by a wave of energy that sent her crashing into the porch railing. "Do not shoot," Harry yelled. "You will make it worse." "Then what do we do?" Harry did not answer. He was already moving, forcing his battered body to its feet, pushing toward the maelstrom of energy that surrounded Valeria. Every step was agony. The power radiating from her was immense, pressing against him like a physical weight, threatening to crush him flat. But he had been crushed before. He had been burned and shot and broken. He had survived things that should have killed him a dozen times over. He was not going to let a little alien energy stop him now. He reached the edge of her field and felt his skin begin to blister. He pushed through anyway, 2 more steps. The clothes on his arms started to smoke. He kept going, 1 more step. He could feel his eyebrows singeing, could smell his own hair burning. He did not stop. And then he was there, standing directly in front of her, reaching up through the chaos to cup her face in his hands. "Valeria," he said, his voice somehow steady despite everything. "Look at me. I am right here. I am not leaving." Her white eyes flickered. Something in them shifted, a hint of gold breaking through the blinding light. "Breathe," Harry said. "Just breathe. In and out. In and out. Focus on my voice. Focus on my hands. I have got you. I cannot," she gasped, the first word she had spoken since the episode began. "I cannot control it. It is too strong. Then do not control it. Give it to me." "What?" "Your field. Your power. Give it to me. Let me take it. It will kill you." Harry smiled through the pain. "Maybe. Maybe not. But I would rather die trying to help you than live knowing I was too scared to try." He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. The energy between them intensified beyond anything he had ever felt. A tsunami of power crashing against the dam of his light. He could feel himself cracking under the strain, could feel something vital inside him starting to give way. But he held on. He thought of Linda, of the way she used to look at him when he came home from a long deployment. He thought of Jake, of the boy who had grown into a man without him. He thought of all the people he had saved over the years, all the machines he had fixed, all the small kindnesses he had offered to strangers who would never know his name. He thought of 68 years of life, of Boston sorrow, and everything in between. And he decided that if this was how it ended, it was not a bad way to go. Then, miraculously, impossibly, the pressure began to ease. Valeria's field started to recede, drawn into Harry's body like water into parched earth. The white faded from her eyes, replaced by that familiar gold. The energy crackling around them diminished, then disappeared entirely. She collapsed against him, and for the first time in 200 years, she felt solid, grounded, real. "Harold," she whispered against his chest. "I am here. I'm sorry. I almost killed you, but you did not." She pulled back to look at him, her golden eyes glistening with tears she had not shed in centuries. "No," she said, "I did not." They stood there for a long moment, supporting each other in the ruins of his kitchen. Then Harry became aware of something he had not noticed before. Valeria was leaning on him, not floating, not hovering, not maintaining that careful distance she always kept from physical objects, leaning with her full weight against his body. "Valeria," he said slowly, "you are touching me. Yes, I mean really touching me, like all of you." She looked down at herself, at the way her body was pressed against his, at the way his arms were wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes widened. "The field," she breathed. "It is gone. Not gone entirely, but suppressed. I cannot feel it. Is that good?" "Harold, I have not felt like this in 200 years. I cannot remember what it is like to simply stand without fear of destroying everything around me." She stepped back, looking at her hands, at the floor that was not cracking beneath her feet, at the walls that were not buckling from her presence. "How is this possible?" "The surge," Harry said. "When your field went critical, I absorbed most of it. Must have created some kind of equilibrium." Valeria shook her head. "That should not be possible. The amount of energy you would have had to contain should have killed me." "Yeah, I figured. But here we are." She stared at him with an expression he could not quite read. Then slowly, deliberately, she walked to one of the remaining kitchen chairs and stood before it. "Harold, I am going to try something." "Okay, if the chair breaks, if anything goes wrong, I need you to catch me." "Can you do that?" "I have been catching people my whole life. One more is not going to make a difference." She took a deep breath, let it out slowly. And then, for the first time in 200 years, Queen Valeria of the Valorian Federation sat down. The chair held. She sat there perfectly still, waiting for the familiar surge of destructive energy, waiting for the crack of wood and the smell of burning, waiting for the disappointment she had felt every other time she had tried this. But nothing happened. The chair simply held her weight, the way chairs had held the weight of countless beings throughout history, a simple piece of furniture performing its simple function. Valeria began to cry, not the restrained tears of a monarch, not the dignified weeping of a queen. She sobbed like a child, great heaving gasps of emotion that shook her entire body. 2 centuries of loneliness and exhaustion and desperate hope all pouring out at once. Harry did not know what to say. He had never been good with words, especially words of comfort, so he did the only thing he could think of. He walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. She grabbed his hand and held it like a drowning woman clutching a life preserver. Her tears soaked into his sleeve. Her body shook against his palm. And slowly, gradually, the storm passed. 200 years, she whispered. 200 years of standing, of waiting, of praying for something exactly like this. And now I am sitting in a broken kitchen in Texas, holding hands with an old human I met 3 days ago, and I am happier than I have been in 2 centuries. Harry felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt since Linda died, something he had thought was gone forever. "Hope, well," he said quietly, "the kitchen is pretty wrecked. But I can fix it." Valeria laughed through her tears. "You can fix anything, can you not?" "Most things, not everything, but I try." She looked up at him, her golden eyes still wet, her silver face still beautiful despite the tracks of tears. "You fixed me," she said. "In 3 days, you fixed something that 200 years of the finest medical minds in the galaxy could not touch. I did not fix you. I just gave you a place to rest." "Same thing, Harold. Same thing." They stayed like that for a long time, the old soldier and the alien queen, in the ruins of a Texas kitchen, learning what it felt like to not be alone. Later that night, after the kitchen had been cleared and the windows boarded up, Harry sat on his porch with Max at his feet. The old dog had been strangely quiet since Valeria's episode, watching the house with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than any animal should. Inside, Valeria was sitting on the couch, actually sitting. She had been there for 2 hours, not moving, not speaking, just experiencing the simple miracle of rest. Harry understood. Some things were too profound for words. General Kyle approached from the perimeter, her scarred face unreadable in the moonlight. She is stable, Harry said before the general could ask. For now, at least. What you did today should have been impossible. I have been doing impossible things since Kuwait. You get used to it after a while. Kyle sat down on the porch steps, her armor creaking softly. In all my years of service, I have never seen anyone stand in the middle of a royal field surge and survive. Lucky, I guess. No, the general shook her head. Not luck. Something else. The Emperor chose well when he gave you the light. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Kale spoke again, her voice lower, more serious. Harry, there is something you need to know. What? Prince Draven did not leave because he wanted to. He left because he had to attend an emergency session of the High Council. But he left behind more than just guards. What do you mean? Kale hesitated. The armor Valeria wears, the ceremonial dress that marks her as queen, it has been tampered with. Tampered how? Modified to amplify the royal field instead of suppressing it, to push her toward exactly the kind of critical surge you witnessed today. Harry's blood ran cold. Someone has been trying to kill her. Not just kill her, destabilize her. A royal field at critical mass could destroy this entire region. Perhaps more. It would look like an accident, a tragic malfunction that no one could have predicted. And Draven would be next in line for the throne. Yes. Harry looked through the window at Valeria, peacefully sitting on his old couch, finally resting after 200 years of vigilance. Does she know? I do not believe so. The modifications were subtle, expert work. I only discovered them because I was looking. We have to tell her, I know. But tonight, let her rest. Let her have this one night of peace before we burden her with more betrayal. Harry nodded slowly. The old soldier in him understood the value of rest before battle. The man in him just wanted to protect her from more pain. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. Kale stood and began to walk back toward her post. Then she paused and looked over her shoulder. Harry, yeah, you are a good man. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. In 600 years of service, I have met many beings who call themselves heroes. You are the first who actually deserves the title. She disappeared into the darkness before he could respond. Harry sat there for a long time, thinking about heroes and villains, about queens and betrayers, about the strange turn his life had taken in the span of a few short days. Max pressed against his leg, and Harry reached down to scratch behind the old dog's ears. Quite a mess we have gotten ourselves into, boy. Max looked up at him with those wose brown eyes. And for just a moment, Harry could have sworn the dog smiled. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when the first explosion shook the farmhouse. Harry was on his feet before the sound finished echoing. 30 years of combat instincts overriding 68 years of aging joints. He grabbed his shotgun from beside the bed and moved to the window. What he saw made his stomach drop. Fire bloomed across his cornfield. 3 of the Valorian guard posts were already burning, silver bodies scattered among the charred stalks. More ships were descending through the morning sky, sleek black vessels that moved with predatory grace. Not the ceremonial craft that had brought Draven. These were warships. Assassins. They found us, Valeria said from the doorway. Her golden eyes were hard, her posture shifting from the relaxed woman who had spent the night on his couch to the warrior queen who had ruled for 2 centuries. Draven? His personal guard. The Shadow Fleet. They answer only to him. Another explosion rocked the house. Somewhere outside, General Kale was shouting orders, rallying her remaining troops to form a defensive line. How many? Harry asked. Too many. Kale only has 20 soldiers. Draven would have sent at least 50. Then we need to even the odds. Harry moved toward the door, but Valeria caught his arm. Harold, wait, these are not ordinary soldiers. They are enhanced, modified for assassination. You cannot fight them with a shotgun. I was not planning to fight them with a shotgun. He looked down at his hands, at the blue light pulsing beneath his skin, brighter now than it had ever been, fed by the energy he had absorbed from Valeria the day before. You said your field could be used as a weapon, he said. If I can absorb it, can I also release it? Valeria's eyes widened. In theory, yes, but you have never trained for combat applications. The energy could tear you apart. It could also tear apart the people trying to kill us. I will take those odds. Before she could argue further, a black armored figure crashed through the kitchen window. Harry spun and fired his shotgun on pure instinct, the blast catching the assassin in the chest and sending him stumbling backward. But the soldier did not fall. The armor absorbed the impact, and within seconds the attacker was advancing again. Harry dropped the useless weapon and raised his glowing hands. He had no idea what he was doing. No training, no technique, no understanding of the forces he was trying to control. He just reached deep inside himself, found the reservoir of light that had been building for 30 years, and pushed. A beam of pure blue energy erupted from his palms and struck the assassin dead center. The black armor that had shrugged off a shotgun blast melted like wax in a furnace. The soldier behind it did not even have time to scream. Harry stood there, breathing hard, staring at his hands in disbelief. I did not know I could do that. Neither did I, Valeria said. But it appears my father's gift was more comprehensive than anyone realized. Another crash from the living room. More attackers incoming. We need to move, Valeria said. No. Harry shook his head. We need to fight. If we run, they will just follow us. And I am done running. He grabbed her hand, feeling the familiar surge of her field pressing against his light. You said I was your throne, he said. Let me be your weapon too. Harold, trust me. I have been carrying this thing inside me for 30 years. It is time I finally used it for something that matters. Valeria hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded. Stay close to me, she said, and try not to die. Same to you, Your Majesty. They moved through the shattered farmhouse together, an unlikely pair of warriors. The alien queen whose very presence could destroy, and the old soldier whose body had been transformed into a living battery of impossible energy. Outside, the battle was chaos. General Kyle and her remaining troops had formed a defensive perimeter around the main house, but they were badly outnumbered. Black armored assassins pressed in from all sides, their weapons cutting down defenders with brutal efficiency. Harry and Valeria emerged onto the porch, and everything changed. Valeria released her field for the first time since her surge the day before. Not the wild, uncontrolled explosion of a critical failure, but a focused wave of destructive force that swept across the yard like a tsunami. Assassins were thrown backward, their armor crumpling under the pressure. But the effort cost her. Harry could feel her energy draining, her field destabilizing with each pulse she released. So he did what he had been doing for 3 days. He absorbed. Every time Valeria's field threatened to go critical, Harry drew the excess energy into himself. Every time she pushed too hard, he pulled her back from the edge. They moved together like dancers, like partners who had trained for years instead of days, each one compensating for the other's weaknesses. The assassins fell back, regrouped, attacked again and again and again. Harry lost track of time, lost track of how many enemies he had faced, lost track of everything except the woman beside him and the power flowing between them. Then he heard the whistle of an energy bolt, a fraction of a second too late. The shot caught him in the left shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and blinding. He could feel blood soaking through his shirt, could feel something important inside him starting to give way. Harold, Valeria screamed, I'm fine. He was not fine. He was very far from fine, but he had been shot before. He knew how to push through pain. You are bleeding. I have been bleeding for 30 years. One more hole is not going to make a difference. He forced himself back to his feet, swaying slightly, and raised his hands again. The blue glow was dimmer now, flickering like a candle in a windstorm. We need to end this, he said, before I run out of gas. Harry, you are injured. If you push yourself too hard, then I push myself too hard. Would not be the first time. He looked at her, the silver-skinned queen who had traveled across the galaxy to find him, who had trusted him with her vulnerability, who had given him something he thought he had lost forever. Purpose, Valeria, he said quietly. Whatever happens next, I want you to know something. What? These past few days have been the best days I have had in 30 years, maybe longer. You gave me something I did not think I would ever have again. Thank you, Harold. Do not talk like that. We are going to survive this, maybe. But just in case we do not, I wanted you to know. He squeezed her hand once, then turned back to the battle, and that was when Max appeared. The old German shepherd had been absent since the fighting started, and Harry had assumed the worst. But now the dog came walking through the carnage with a calm purpose that seemed completely at odds with the chaos around him. "Max," Harry called, "get inside. It is not safe." Max did not respond. He just kept walking until he stood directly in front of Harry and Valeria. Then he did something that made Harry's heart stop. He began to change. The dog's body elongated, stretched, transformed. Silver skin replaced brown fur. Limbs shifted and reformed into something humanoid. Within seconds, a tall Valorian male stood where Max had been, clad in ancient ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Do not be alarmed," the being said in a voice that Harry recognized despite never having heard it spoken. "It is still me." Harry stared at the creature that had been his dog for 14 years. The creature he had talked to, confided in, loved like a member of his own family. "Max, my true name is Theron. I was the personal guardian of Emperor K.L. Severin. When he passed, he gave me one final mission. Protect the light bearer until the day comes when the light is needed. You have been my dog for 14 years. Theron nodded slowly. "For the first 16 years, I watched over you from the shadows. A stranger passing by, a mechanic at the garage you visited, a customer at the diner where you ate breakfast. Always nearby, never close enough to raise suspicion. But when Linda passed, when I saw how alone you truly were, I knew you needed more than a distant guardian. You needed a friend. So I became Max." Harry's mind reeled. 16 years of strangers he had barely noticed. 14 years of a day he had loved like family. 30 years of protection he had never known existed. "The form was different," Theron continued, "but the bond was always real. Every conversation we shared, every night I lay beside your bed while you fought your nightmares. Every morning I watched you drink your coffee and talk to Linda's photograph. I was there, Harold. I have always been there." Harry did not know whether to laugh or cry or punch the alien in the face. 14 years of conversations. 14 years of secrets shared with a creature he thought could not understand. 14 years of thinking he was talking to a dog when he was actually talking to an ancient alien warrior. "You heard everything," he said. "Every stupid thing I ever said. Every time I cried. Every night I woke up screaming from nightmares." Theron nodded. "I heard, and I stayed. Because you needed someone, Harold. And I was honored to be that someone, even if you did not know who I truly was." Before Harry could respond, a new sound filled the air, the deep thrumming of massive engines. The kind of sound that could only come from capital ships. He looked up and felt his heart sink. The sky was filling with vessels, dozens of them, hundreds, a full battle fleet descending through the clouds like a swarm of metal locusts. "Draven," General Kale said, limping over to join them. She was bleeding from a wound on her forehead, but her eyes were still sharp. "He brought everything." A holographic projection flickered to life in front of them, and Prince Draven's cold face appeared. "Cousin," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I heard there was an attack on your position. How fortunate that I was nearby with reinforcements." Valeria's jaw tightened. "You orchestrated this attack, Draven. Do not pretend otherwise. Such accusations. I am merely trying to protect the Queen of our Federation. And if that protection requires me to take certain individuals into custody for questioning..." His eyes moved to Harry. "The light bearer, for instance. He is clearly a danger. Look at the destruction he has caused. For the safety of everyone, he should be contained. I will not let you take him. Then you leave me no choice." Draven's image flickered out, and the fleet began to move into attack formation. Harry looked at the sky filled with warships. He looked at the handful of defenders gathered around him. He looked at Valeria, at Kale, at Theron. They were outmatched, outnumbered, out of options. Unless... Harry thought about what Theron had said. Protect the light bearer until the day comes when the light is needed. Maybe that day was today. "Valeria," he said slowly, "your field. When it went critical yesterday, I absorbed almost all of it." "Yes. How much energy was that?" Valeria hesitated. "Enough to level a city, perhaps more. And it is still inside me?" "Most of it, yes. Your body is containing it, but if I let it out all at once, what would happen?" Valeria's eyes widened. "Harold, no. What would happen? It would create an electromagnetic pulse. Massive. It would disable every electronic system for hundreds of miles, including Draven's fleet, and including me? She did not answer. She did not need to. Harry looked up at the sky one more time. All those ships, all those soldiers, all that power arrayed against them. Then he looked at Valeria, at the woman who had given him 3 days of meaning after 30 years of emptiness. I am 68 years old, he said quietly. I have lived a good life, longer than I expected, honestly. If I can trade whatever time I have left for something that matters, that seems like a fair deal. Harold, please. There has to be another way. Maybe there is, but I do not see it, and those ships are not going to wait for us to figure it out. He took her hand one last time. You asked me if you could sit on me, he said. I told you I would hurt you, but the truth is you could never hurt me. You gave me something I did not know I needed, a reason to keep going, a reason to believe I was not just a broken old man waiting to die. You are not broken. No, I am not anymore. He pulled her close and pressed his forehead against hers. Take care of yourself, Your Majesty. Find someone else to sit on, someone younger, someone who does not have bad knees and a worse attitude. I do not want someone else. I want you. Harry smiled. Then I guess I better try not to die. He released her hand and walked forward, past the burning remains of his farm, past the bodies of fallen soldiers, past everything he had known and loved for 68 years. Above him, Draven's fleet was preparing to fire. Harry stopped in the middle of his ruined cornfield and looked up at the sky. He thought about Linda, about Jake, about all the people he had saved over the years and all the ones he had lost. He thought about a dying alien in a desert, pressing a hand against his chest, giving him a gift he had never understood. He thought about a silver-skinned queen, kneeling in this very field, asking if she could sit on him. Then he closed his eyes, reached deep inside himself, and let go. The light erupted from his body like a second sun. Blue fire poured from every pore, every cell, every atom of his being. It rose into the sky in a column of pure energy that seemed to touch the heavens themselves. And then it expanded. The pulse swept outward in all directions, passing through Draven's fleet like wind through leaves. Ships went dark. Engines failed. Weapons powered down. Hundreds of vessels began to drift, powerless, their crews scrambling to understand what had happened. On the ground, Harry collapsed. His body hit the scorched earth, and he did not move. The blue light faded from his skin. His chest was still. His eyes were closed. He had given everything he had. Valeria ran to him, falling to her knees beside his motionless form. Harold, Harold, please. She pressed her hand against his chest, searching for a heartbeat. There was nothing. No, 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 you do not get to do this. You do not get to save everyone and then leave. I did not travel 4,000 light years to lose you now. She placed both hands on his chest and did something she had never done before. Instead of releasing her field, she pushed it into him. Every ounce of energy she had, every drop of power that had made her the deadliest being in the galaxy, she poured into this old human who had given her the one thing she needed most. Come back, she whispered. Come back to me. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Harry gasped. His eyes flew open, burning with golden light that slowly faded back to their normal brown. His chest heaved as he sucked in air. His hands gripped the dirt beneath him, as if afraid he might float away. Valeria, I am here. Did it work? She laughed through her tears, looking up at the sky full of disabled warships. It worked. You saved us all. Good. Harry let his head fall back against the ground. Because I think I need a nap. General Kyle organized the roundup of Draven's forces with military efficiency. The prince himself was found on his flagship, raging impotently at controls that no longer responded. When Valorian's soldiers loyal to the Queen finally breached his bridge, he did not resist. Some part of him seemed to know that the game was over. Valeria confronted him in the burned-out remains of Harry's living room, surrounded by the evidence of his treachery. Why, she asked. We were family. I trusted you. Draven's cold eyes met hers. Because you were always better than me. Smarter, stronger, more beloved. For 200 years I stood in your shadow, waiting for my chance, waiting for you to fail. But you never did, so you decided to make me fail. I decided to help the Federation. Your condition was deteriorating. Your field was destabilizing. It was only a matter of time before you lost control and killed millions. I was going to prevent that. By killing me first, by removing an unstable element, it would have been clean, painless. The people would have mourned their queen and welcomed their new emperor, never knowing the truth. Valeria shook her head. You do not understand, Draven. You never did. Being a leader is not about control. It is about service, about putting others before yourself, about finding people who make you stronger instead of trying to tear down everyone around you. She glanced at Harry, who was sitting in a chair with his shoulder bandaged, watching the proceedings with tired eyes. This human taught me more about leadership in 3 days than you learned in 2 centuries, she continued. He has nothing. No power, no wealth, no army. But people respect him because he helps them without asking for anything in return. He is a primitive creature from a backwater world. He is the man my father chose. And he is worth more than 1,000 princes who scheme and plot and betray. Valeria straightened, her voice taking on the formal tone of royal pronouncement. Draven of House Severin, for treason against the crown, for conspiracy to commit regicide, and for the murder of loyal Valorian citizens, I sentence you to exile. You will spend the remainder of your existence on a prison world at the edge of known space. You will never see Valoria again. You will never hold power again. You will live knowing that everything you worked for was for nothing. Draven's face contorted with rage. You cannot do this. I am a prince of the blood, and I am the queen, your queen, and my word is law. She turned her back on him. Take him away. 2 days later, a military helicopter landed in what remained of Harry's cornfield. Jake Mitchell emerged, still in uniform, his face a mask of controlled emotion. He found his father sitting on the porch of a temporary shelter that the Valorian engineers had constructed from the remains of the farmhouse. Max, now in his true form as Theron, stood nearby in a posture of eternal vigilance. Dad, son. They looked at each other for a long moment. 2 men who had spent too many years apart, who had let duty and distance and unspoken pain build walls between them. Jake spoke first. I got the briefing. All of it. The light, the queen. What you did to stop Draven's fleet. Harry nodded. They said you died, that your heart stopped for almost 2 minutes before she brought you back. Sounds about right. Jake's composure cracked. His voice came out rough, barely controlled. 30 years, Dad. 30 years you carried this thing inside you and never told anyone. Never told me. I thought you were just being distant. I thought you did not want me around. I thought... Harry rose from his chair. It hurt to move, hurt to breathe, hurt to do anything. But he walked to his son anyway. I was trying to protect you, he said. I did not understand what was happening to me. I was afraid if I got too close, I would hurt you the way I hurt your mother. Mom? Dad, what are you talking about? Every time I touched her, the energy would leak through. Small burns, nothing serious, but it got worse over time. By the end, I could not even hold her hand without causing pain. Jake stared at him. Is that why you were so distant at the funeral? I thought you did not care. I cared too much. That was always the problem. I loved you and your mother more than anything in this world, but I was dangerous. I did not know how to be close to people without hurting them. Tears were streaming down Jake's face now. All those years I thought you did not love me. I have loved you every single day of your life. I just did not know how to show it. Harry opened his arms. It was the first time he had offered a hug in 30 years. Jake stepped into his embrace, and for a long moment they just held each other. Father and son. 2 men finally bridging the gap that time and pain had created between them. I am sorry, Harry whispered. I am so sorry I was not there. You are here now. That is what matters. 1 month later, Harry stood in the throne room of the Valorian capital. The journey through space had been overwhelming, a blur of stars and wonders that his Texas mind could barely comprehend. But nothing had prepared him for this. Millions of beings filled the chamber, their silver faces turned toward the raised platform where Queen Valeria stood in her ceremonial robes. The walls themselves seemed to sing with energy, ancient crystals resonating with the collective heartbeat of a civilization that spanned 10,000 worlds. Harry felt ridiculously out of place in his borrowed suit. a 68-year-old farmer surrounded by beings who could reshape reality with their minds. But Valeria had insisted he be here, had insisted he stand beside her for this moment. She raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent. Today, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room, we mark a new chapter in the history of our Federation. For too long, we have looked inward, focused only on our own affairs, blind to the potential of the wider galaxy. She gestured toward Harry. This human taught me something I had forgotten in 200 years of rule. That true strength comes not from power, but from connection. Not from dominance, but from service. He saved my life not because he sought reward, but because it was the right thing to do. She descended the steps of her throne and walked toward him. Harold Mitchell of Earth, you carry within you the light of the protector, the sacred energy that my father entrusted to your keeping. You have proven yourself worthy of that trust 1,000 times over. She knelt before him, and the entire chamber gasped. Before the assembled Federation, I ask you one question. Harry's heart was pounding. He knew what was coming, but knowing did not make it any less terrifying. Will you permit me to sit upon you for the rest of our days? The silence was absolute. A queen had never knelt before anyone, had never asked anyone for anything. Yet here she was, this ruler of 10,000 worlds, asking a simple human for permission. Harry cleared his throat. Madam, he said, his Texas drawl echoing through the alien architecture, I have to warn you, I have got bad knees, a worse back, and I snore something awful. You sure you want to sign up for that? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even the most stoic Valorian nobles could not hide their amusement. Valeria smiled up at him. I have waited 200 years for someone I could rest upon. A little snoring seems like a small price to pay. Harry reached down and took her hand, helping her to her feet. Then yes, he said, you can sit on me whenever you want, for as long as I have left, which, thanks to the energy now bonded to your cells, will be approximately 200 years. Harry blinked. Come again? The light does not just protect others, it protects its bearer. Your aging has effectively stopped. You will live as long as I do. You could have mentioned that earlier. And miss the look on your face right now? Never. She kissed him then, in front of millions of witnesses, and the throne room erupted in cheers. 6 months after that day, Harry sat on the porch of his rebuilt farmhouse in Texas. The corn was growing well, tended by automated systems that the Valorian engineers had installed as a gift. Max, or rather Theron, lay at his feet in dog form because, as he put it, he had grown accustomed to the shape after 14 years. Jake visited every weekend now, sometimes bringing his wife and daughter. Little Emily loved her grandfather's stories about space queens and ancient warriors. She also loved Theron, who tolerated her enthusiastic hugs with the patience of a being who had lived for 6 centuries. Valeria emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had learned to make it the way Harry liked it, strong and black with just a hint of sweetness. It had taken her 3 months, but she had mastered the technique through sheer determination. She sat down beside him, her body pressing against his, in that way that still made his heart skip after all these months. The royal field was completely stable now, their energies perfectly balanced. She could touch anything she wanted, sit anywhere she pleased, but she always chose to sit on him. What are you thinking about? She asked. Nothing much, just how strange life is. A year ago, I was talking to my dog about how lonely I was. Now I am married to an alien queen and apparently going to live for 200 more years. Any regrets? Harry considered the question seriously. He thought about Linda, about all the years of loneliness, about the curse he had carried for so long. No, he said finally, no regrets. Everything that happened, even the hard parts, led me here, led me to you. Valeria rested her head on his shoulder. My father would have liked you, she said. He always said that true nobility was not about blood or title. It was about character, about choosing to help others even when it cost you everything. Sounds like a wise man. He was, and he chose well when he gave you the light. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Texas plains. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Theron lifted his head, alert for any threat, then settled back down when he determined there was none. A small ship descended through the evening sky and landed near the barn. A young Valorian messenger emerged, looking slightly nervous. Your Majesty, apologies for the interruption. What is it? We have received a signal from the Forbidden Zone. Something is awakening. The High Council requests your presence immediately. Valeria sighed. She looked at Harry. It seems our quiet evening is at an end. Seems that way. She stood, brushing off her jeans, human clothes that she had come to prefer over formal robes. Will you come with me? Harry considered. His knees were aching. His back was sore from the physical therapy he was still doing after his sacrifice. He was 68 years old and had already died once in the past year. But Valeria was looking at him with those golden eyes, and he knew there was only one answer. Let me grab my coat. She smiled. That smile that still made him feel like a young man, despite all evidence to the contrary. Harry, before we go, one more thing. What? She sat down on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Thank you, she said, for everything. He held her close, feeling her warmth, her weight, her presence. Thank you for asking to sit on me, he said. Best question anyone ever asked me. Best answer anyone ever gave me. They stayed like that for a moment longer. Then together they rose to face whatever new challenge awaited. Because that was what they did now. They faced things together, the end for now.